All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual spARO session, Work-Life Balance and Mentor-Mentee Communication. I'm your moderator, Janelle Singh. I work at SA School of Medicine as research instructor. A few reminders before we get started. Today's session and all of the virtual mentoring sessions of spARO will be recorded and posted for later viewing. And don't forget to join us today at 3:45 p.m. EST for navigating the grant landscape session and another session on Thursday, February 6th, Careers in Academia at 10:30 a.m. EST and Careers in Industry at 3:30 p.m. EST. Please direct your questions to the moderator via chat function. Should you have any technical issues, please send an email to headquarters@aro.org and a staff member will get back to you. All right, let's get started. So pursuing a research career in academia can be overwhelming, sometimes with days-long experiments and late-night data analysis sessions or preparing presentations. In this fast-paced and competitive research environment, the attrition rate of good researchers is unfortunately very high these days due to the burnout feeling that gets built over time. Additionally, the work environment around you and your communication with your mentor also play a vital role to help build a successful career in research. So in this session, we'll talk about strategies to create and maintain a good work-life balance and foster effective communication and healthy professional relationship with your mentor. We are joined today by two faculty members, Dr. Anahita Mehta from University of Michigan and Dr. Mike Bao from Ear Institute at University College London. Before we get started for the topic discussion, I would like to introduce our today's speakers. Dr. Mehta is an assistant professor at Cascade Hearing Research Institute at the University of Michigan since fall 2022. Dr. Mehta received her PhD in auditory neuroscience at University College London, UK in 2015 and went to do her postdoctoral training at the University of Minnesota in USA. Her postdoctoral research explored pitch perception from both clinical and fundamental perspectives. She used vocoder simulations to study limits of pitch perception in cochlear implants and also examined basic properties of pitch-related phenomena in listeners without hearing loss using psychoacoustic, EEG, and fMRI. Her K99 research focused on the parameters governing spectrotemporal integration in pitch perception through psychophysics and represented harmonicity in the auditory cortex using functional magnetic resonance imaging. At the University of Michigan, her lab focuses on combining behavioral measures of auditory perception in humans with neuroimaging to establish neural correlates of perception, particularly in the field of pitch perception and auditory grouping. Her independent research follows two main directions. First, using physiological models of auditory system with novel stimuli to understand how listeners compute the pitch of multiple concurrent sounds. And second, investigating the interaction of different acoustic cues, such as pitch, space, and time, and their role in biasing perception in complex auditory environment. These research lines aim to uncover the basic neural mechanisms underlying these auditory processes and to understand the effect of sensory loss on them in individuals with hearing loss and cochlear implants. Dr. Mehta has served in different committees of Acoustical Society of America and is currently a member of Diversity and Minority Affairs Committee of ARO, and she is also a founding member of BIPOC CST Network. So welcome, Dr. Mehta, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Janelle.
Welcome. Our second speaker today is Mike Bao, who is a professor of autogenetics at and deputy director of the University College London Ear Institute. Mike has a BSc Honours and MPhil from the University of Birmingham and completed his DPhil studies within the Newfield Department of Clinical Medicine at the University of Oxford in 2003. Following two postdocs in Oxford, in 2010, he joined the Mammalian Genetics Unit at the MRC Harlow Institute, initially as a senior investigator scientist within the Genetics and Pathobiology of Deafness program before becoming the program leader for sensory neural hearing loss research in 2018. At MRC Harvard, Mike was heavily involved in large-scale phenotype and gene-driven programs aimed at uncovering gene functions in the mouse. Using these approaches, he and his team successfully identified and characterized novel genes that are essential for mammalian auditory function. In July 2020, Mike joined the UCL Ear Institute, initially as a principal research fellow, while still leading the sensory neural hearing research program at the MRC Harvard Institute. In April 2020, Mike and his team moved full-time to UCL, at which time he took up a senior non-clinical fellowship where they continued to elaborate upon the genetic landscape of mammalian hearing. In 2023, Mike became deputy director of the Ear Institute, and in 2024, he was promoted to professor of autogenetics. Outside of UCL, Mike is a fellow of Royal Society of Biology, chair of the Harvard Animal Welfare and Ethical Review Board Committee, and also an external evaluation committee member for the Infra-Frontier program, a member of the organizing committee for the biennial mouse as an instrument for ear research workshop held at Jackson Labs, Bar Harbor. And he's also an elected council member and communication officer for Association for Research in Otolaryngology, that is ARO. So welcome, Dr. Bao. Thank you for joining this session today.
Thank you very much.
And now we would like to hear from both of you about your experiences and recommendations on today's topic. Either one of you can go first.
Okay, so as Mike volunteered me to go first, I think this is a good balance between me being a fairly new PI and Mike being a senior PI. So I know this session is supposed to be work-life balance as well as mentor-mentee communication. So we can start off with work-life balance, if that's okay, Mike. So the thing I mainly want to specify for work-life balance is I don't think work-life balance is an accurate term. I think it's more, it goes in waves almost. So it just depends on A, your priorities, B, your lifestyle. So for example, I don't have children, but so my perspective might be quite different to people who have kids, and also what career stage you're at. So for example, when you start a lab, it is quite chaotic. So when I started in 2022, the first year I knew it was going to be very busy. So I think knowing that what takes priority, it's almost like it's like you're integrating both sides, and one is, it's hard to get equal weighting to both of them, but it's important to keep in mind that when things subside or when work can take a backseat. So for example, right now at the ARO being starting in a few weeks, it's not going to be, all the labs are going to be in high gear trying to prep for it, but you know that February is a busy month. But then when you're back from ARO, you kind of need to actively schedule off time to regain your sanity almost, or just trying to recharge, because you can't really, burnout is hard to recover from. So I think in terms of work-life balance, knowing the busy times and when to take back your time for yourself and your family is important. And then the typical things are learn to say no. That is pretty difficult and it comes with practice. So I think one of the things that I recently, literally last week, I was at one of these grad student recruitment dinners, and somebody at the gate was like, "Oh, can you present a poster on Saturday morning at 9 a.m.? This was Friday night." And my first reaction was like, "Oh, okay, sure, I'll do it." And without really thinking that it is Friday night. Oh, why am I doing this to myself? And then I thought about it, and I'm like, I already have like 3 things I would have to move around. So I went back to them and I'm like, is it okay if I don't do this? And then they were like, yeah, we asked everybody at the gate, and you're the first person who said yes, because everybody else said no. So just know that it is okay to say no to people. And it's very difficult to say it as you're like junior, but the thing is you have to prioritize things. And if things you can say no to things, you should. I will let Mike speak for a bit, but we can jump in.
Thank you, Dr. Mehta.
I would absolutely, I agree with everything you just said. I would certainly also say that thinking and managing work-life balance is important throughout your career. And it doesn't necessarily get easier the longer you're in it, but hopefully you kind of learn the tools and tricks to get better at it. Perhaps as a younger faculty member or as a student, you would find it more difficult to say no. I mean, I still find it difficult to say no, but actually that is a skill that everybody needs to learn. Overburdening yourself so that it impacts on you detrimentally is not a good thing. And you know, by taking on that one extra thing, that can actually kind of destroy several things that are ongoing in your work or actually in your life. Because arguably, the more that you do in your work life, the more things that you take on, you know, what are the things that kind of give way? The things that tend to give way will be sleep, social life, your weekends, your hobbies, relationships, and just actually downtime, your relaxation time. And actually, they're all really important, massively important. If you're not happy or you're not getting a fulfilling kind of, I guess, sort of social life side, so getting your sleep and everything, I mean, how can you be productive at work? You can't. Now, again, as you move through your career, work-life balance could look very, very different. As a student, I know that I used to work hard and play hard. Actually, work was part of my social life. I was in a bustling lab. I probably shouldn't say it now, but about at least 3 nights a week, I used to sleep on the office floor because we used to run the old 373 and 377 sequences. 373 was on a 12-hour run. So if you wanted to get a second run in of the day, you had to be there when it came off from the person that said it during the day. I'm not advocating people sleeping on the office floor, by the way. But that worked well for me. And my supervisor at the time was then very happy when I used to take Wednesday afternoons off to go and play football, because that's what happened in Oxford. Sports was always Wednesday afternoon. So I guess this also comes into perhaps our other topic of mentor-mentee things. But you know, I think work-life balance is very much a personal thing. It's down to the individual. Some individuals can get by on very little sleep. I'm not one of them. So again, that means I just have to manage my time slightly differently to somebody that can get by on 4 hours sleep. I'm sort of somewhat envious of those people, but as I say, I'm definitely not one of them. I think everything that you mentioned before about you mentioned about setting boundaries, about time management, stress management, trying to keep some bandwidth. So I would say with work-life balance is what you don't want is you don't want to maximize the work side of that. You always need to leave a little bit in reserve, because some things always crop up at the last minute. Now, whether that might be an invitation to do something that you absolutely don't want to say no to because it's an amazing opportunity, if you leave just that little bit of space, that little bit of wiggle room, it enables you to be able to say yes to things like that. The other thing that I would say is perhaps it's always good most people have appraisals, yearly appraisals. but if you don't as a student, because you don't generally have appraisals as a student, but at least once a year, I would say it's always good to sit back and take stock of everything you're doing. So everything you're doing at work, everything you're doing in your social life, whatever, and actually just work out what's beneficial and what's not, because sometimes we just kind of collect things as we move along, and we suddenly look back and we kind of go, I'm on 7 committees. Why am I sitting on 7 committees? I don't need to be sitting on 7 committees. And sometimes it's quite good to have a bit of a spring clean and actually step away from some and just say, right, okay, I've been on that committee now for 2 years. I've kind of gained all the experience that I'm going to get from that. It's probably time that I let somebody else have a go, and stick with the things that are still beneficial to you, the things that you enjoy doing. And as I say, sort of jettison the ones that perhaps have already run their course, but you're still doing it because you just haven't got around to saying, I can't do this anymore. So they're kind of my initial kind of thoughts on work-life balance. I absolutely think that everybody needs to find time in their life for kind of exercise. I'm a big proponent of that. I think finding some sort of form of exercise that you can do regularly and absolutely ring fence it. Do not allow that to be the thing that gets eroded away as you get busier. Yeah, cool. That's kind of where my thoughts are on the subject.
Yeah, I totally also, in case there are questions, please feel free to like put them in the chat, or it'll be nice to have a dialogue. But just jumping off one of the things about the spring cleaning, one of the points that I had like thought about was learning to efficiently delegate, even if you're a postdoc or early career PI. I feel like there's always this thing of not trusting or thinking other people not do as good a job as you, so you want to do everything yourself. But in fact, for example, you can always, for example, if you have 4 review requests in a month, and usually this is just like a word of mouth situation. So start looking for, say, late career grad students or people who you think do not get. So learn to like bring people along with you in your network. And the more people you delegate to, obviously don't delegate things that you should be doing. But I think one of the main, you can delegate to people who might have like slightly easier schedules in that month, for example. Or if an opportunity comes up which you don't want to pass on, but you have absolutely no bandwidth. I'm pretty bad at doing the 20% reserve, as Dr. Bol said. But you can always ask them, like, right now I'm completely maxed out. Can I when does this have to go in by? Can it wait for a month? Can I address this a month later, and then I can make time in my schedule? So I think delegating and scheduling. Curious what both speakers think about the idea of protected time.
Yeah, so I was just looking at George's question there, and I certainly know of colleagues that I have that try to engineer it so that they never accept meetings on particular days of the week. So they keep those days clear so that they can get their head down on things like grant applications, writing papers, reviewing papers, because meetings do break the day up, and you don't have that good solid few hours perhaps that you need especially if you're working on a grant application. I guess unfortunately that's not always possible for people. It's certainly not possible for me as a deputy director. There's far too many meetings that kind of go across the entire week that I just have to go to. But I do think that works well. If I could engineer that, I think I would. You could just say, right, Mondays are the day that I'm not taking meetings. So I think that's one way that you can do it. Protected time. either for themselves or seeing how others utilize it. I mean, absolutely, the thing that I protect time for would be to go to the gym with my son. That's very important to me. That I try to do that. I mean, that tends to be quite late at night, but then I find that helps with me then getting to sleep. So that's pretty good. The other thing I think is, because I've got quite a long commute on the train, so I have about an hour and a half, hour and a quarter commute to work. Knowing that the train times, that's sort of sometimes quite good at making me just think, right, I have to leave now because I have to get that particular train to get home. And it's great because then I can still work on the train. I tend to work offline. I can get all my emails done, and then they all ping away when I get home late at night. But that's also good, having that kind of definitive sort of line in the sand. You are leaving work at this time, because I think that's the other thing. Sometimes people stay sitting at their desk or at their lab bench probably way too late into the evening. I don't know if you've got any other thoughts.
So I started, so I was told very early on from Dr. Susan Shore that multitasking is a myth. Like, you cannot really multitask. You're very non-efficient. So I don't have as many meetings as Mike does, but you do have meetings during the day. But I try and literally for my week schedule out in my calendar chunks of time where this is what I need to be working on. Because sometimes, at least for me, what happens is I finish 3 meetings and then I'm like, ooh, what do I need to do? And then there's such a long to-do list, and then you don't really know where to start. So scheduling, so spending like at least some time at the start of the week or at the end of the week, what I do is I schedule out almost my entire week, literally starting with like gym time, going into all the meetings. And also in terms of meetings for all of my lab people, I have once a week recurring lab meetings, and I try to just put that at the same time. So then in your calendar, that's fixed. Obviously, it's changeable if things come up, but having that just allows you to see how much you can take on as well, because sometimes if you don't have your schedule fully mapped out, at least as a postdoc, so you don't have that many meetings. And then if you don't have a plan, so I would say just having a plan on like what projects you want to work on for that day. For example, everybody usually has a couple of studies going on or things you want to write or work on. So I would say, like, you can say Thursday is my writing day, Wednesday is my like coding day, or things like that. But it also depends on what people like. Like, I'm bad at multitasking, but some people might be okay at it. So it just depends on what works for you. But I would say trying to plan it out just in your Google Calendar works for me.
I totally agree. That didn't work for me as well. I go step by step. I can do 10 things, but I have to go step by step. I cannot like start 5 things in a time and then juggling through different kinds of work or projects.
Yeah, I did that till because I'm early career faculty, so we have like faculty mentors. And then Dr. Shore was like, you'll not get anything done if you don't have one thing to focus on. So I was like, all right. So yeah, that works for me at least. So
yeah.
Are there any questions?
I have a question. Sujata, you want to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not a question, but I was just like, I'm just throwing this at everyone. Like, one of the things that I think everyone, most of us experience is like when you are in a stressful situation or you have lots of things to do, like sometimes your eating behaviors and the habits of eating also get changed, and have like, to everyone, like, how has that happened to you? And if yes, like, how did you like make a proper routine to like get back to your proper eating habits? Like, does like physical activity could also help, I think, with that. So just like trying to learn from everyone here.
I mean, I'm going to sound like a stuck record as I keep talking about this, but I absolutely think that exercise is massively underrated. Well, you know, some people don't rate it as high as I do, for your mental well-being. I think it, I mean, I started going to the gym for my son's mental well-being, but actually I think it, as a consequence, it's been brilliant for me as well. And sometimes, as I say, you kind of think, oh, I can't go to the gym, I've got too much work to do. But actually going to the gym for an hour, hour and a half, you come back, you're more refreshed, you actually get more done. So I really do think, and of course, if you go to the gym, it helps with making you feel hungry, so you eat properly as well. So I think it's a win-win-win-win situation, getting in the exercise.
Yeah, exercise is a very good stress reliever, and people can even try it. Some people don't like to go to the gym, but they can like work on whatever hobby they have, or they listen. Sometimes people just listen to music. Sometimes people go for like doing meditation, so that helps too. So there are several ways you have to basically customize according to what you like to do and what you can do in real time.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There's always something to say, a hobby, even if it's going and having a coffee with friends. It's just about having that time away where you kind of just recharge, refresh, and then you can go back to it, and you'll be way more productive, even though you'll be thinking, oh, I've lost an hour. You haven't. You've actually gained more perspective and more energy. So it's worth it.
Yeah, I just want to add that personally, I'm not like great at keeping at routines. So I try very hard, but sometimes it doesn't work. And I think in those times when you feel like, oh, you've not gone to the, or you've been eating poorly, or you've not been like going to the gym for a few days, or like just even moving. Firstly, walking is very underrated. So if you need anything, just walk around your block listening to a podcast, and any physical activity is better than none. But it's also important to give yourself a bit of grace in terms of if you have a deadline, or if you're not in the best of mental states and you just need a day to sit on the couch and eat chips, it's fine. And just know that you can't keep beating yourself up for like not being just know that like you can just go and walk around the block. Just put on your shoes. You don't need any equipment. And then when you feel like you're in a better mental state, try and keep it on a routine. I have a gym that like charges me if I don't show up to a session. So that's a very good motivator for me of just giving them money for not showing up. So, but it just depends. I am quite poor at like keeping at a routine. So I've just over time learned to not beat myself up. But then once you catch yourself down a slippery slope, just stop and say, okay, I'm not gonna lose my mind over all the days that I've spent on the couch, but then I want to move forward and try and, but it happens to everybody, Sujata. I don't think it is something where, I mean, I know people who are very disciplined, but I also am not one of them. But it's okay. You just try and do your best. And
yeah, I mean, I would absolutely, echoing that, I would say, as I say, work-life balance is a very personal thing. So don't compare yourself to somebody else in your lab or somebody from a different lab. You know, what works for you, because your lives are different. So what works for you, you may want to come in early and leave early. You may want to come in later and leave later. It's purely just what works for you. And obviously, as long as you're supervisor, if you're a student, is in agreement, which they should be, because if that's what maximizes your productivity and potential, then they're going to be on board with it. So
Yeah, thank you everyone. It feels good to see like how everyone has their own story, and how everyone like there's something similar between all of us, I feel like. So it's good.
Thank you, Sujata. I had a question regarding delegating your work. So what I personally have felt, and like many other people also came across that situation, like particularly when you are a graduate student or a early career junior researchers, basically in the lab, you don't have anyone like who you can like give work or rely upon, like, okay, I can delegate this work to this person. And also additionally, since there is some alarm going on, and additionally there is like sometimes like graduate students particularly, they feel like, oh, okay, this is my project, the whole project, I am the manager and I have to finish right from the beginning till I write my thesis or get my paper out. So what are your recommendations for those people?
Well, firstly, I would say I'd be really happy to have a student that is fully engaged in their project as that. But I think it's then just discussing with them that, you know, they at times they may need to give up certain aspects of the work to other people to help out, whether it be somebody from the imaging core or something, you know, along those lines. But I think it's kind of it's healthy that they want ownership of their project. I think that's a good thing. It's just managing their expectations, I think, is then the key. I don't
Yeah.
know what
So,
makes sense.
I think as a postdoc especially, it is very difficult to delegate because you're at a stage where you know what you're doing, and you kind of still want to do everything yourself. But for me, like, I hope my postdocs don't see this, but both my postdocs are very independent and they want to do everything themselves, but their projects are extremely large. So I'm in a constant battle of getting them to like delegate some small things. And what's important is that if you are a person who has a hard time delegating, what you can do is set up systems. So for example, you have your entire protocol written so that like a person from the street can come in and like follow the instructions and do it. And you can be in charge of training up the person you're trying to delegate to. I feel like delegation is a skill that if you don't learn, you cannot really be efficient with your time, because especially as a postdoc, if you don't start practicing delegation of smaller tasks, for example, or if you feel like you need to be present the whole time, you just know that it only gets busier from there. And you just need to, it's a matter of trust, right? You don't trust the person to do things properly. So if you are in that headspace, you just need to make sure you put systems in place, protocols in place, so that you can make it as fail-proof as possible. And then be okay with like mistakes happening, and just create an environment where if somebody makes a mistake, then they feel comfortable enough to report it to you as soon as something is messed up, so that you can like correct it at the same time instead of creating. So it's basically, I think, even in terms of like time management, I think putting in some time in the onset of setting up systems in your lab or in your project of so that other people can follow it in case, say, you fall sick for 2 months and or you need to like go take care of somebody, or you're a primary caretaker. You don't want to be the only person who knows everything about your project. So I'm like a pessimist in my life. So I always think of worst case scenarios. So just think of like, in case somebody leaves tomorrow, the project can't die with that. So you have to just put systems in place. And once you have systems in place and you have, don't just get an undergrad and tell them like, here's a Word document, follow this. You need to shadow them till they follow it. But once they're okay doing it, everybody's capable. I mean, think of yourself as an undergrad and you wanted to be slightly independent in your project too. So I think you just need to trust that people will do a decent job.
These are wonderful insights. Mike, you want to add something to that?
All I was going to say is, delegation is a key skill. It's a difficult skill to kind of learn and to get comfortable with. But bear in mind that, when you're delegating, you're actually also benefiting the person that you're probably delegating to. So this kind of merges a little bit with our other topic today, which is the mentor-mentee thing. But actually, the delegating down and giving responsibility to somebody else, somebody generally, I'm guessing, junior, they get a buzz out of that. They kind of appreciate the fact that you're giving them that responsibility for that particular task. So yeah, you shouldn't see it as I think some people see it as weakness, having to delegate. Oh, I don't want to have to delegate something, but it is important. It's an important skill to learn, definitely.
Sorry, I was muted. Let's move on to the next segment, and that is mentor-mentee communication. So I would like to hear from both of you.
Who wants to go first?
Go on, after you.
Okay. So I feel like the mentor-mentee relationship is dependent on a lot of things, and you can be an excellent mentor and you can be an excellent student. And the first thing is fit. Like, people have different styles of working and different goals that they want to achieve in their life. So when I have, like, for example, if a new postdoc or grad student or undergrad comes in, the first thing you need to know is setting clear expectations, and also knowing what their goals are. So on my lab website, I literally have like or in like a lab manual or so, you can have what the lab culture is and like what is expected out of a person. So for example, when my postdoc started, I basically asked them, like, what kind of track do you want? There are several people who are like, I want to do a short postdoc and go to industry, in which case prioritizing grant writing experience is not my job because it's not beneficial to them. But at the same time, if somebody comes in and says, like, I want to be on an academic track and be at an R1 in 6 years, then you're like, all right, this is your ideal timeline. And then you try and see, like, what is achievable. So I think having clear goals set at the onset of any sort of professional relationship is key. And also in terms of making it known what your, like, no amount of feedback is personal in my case. So my lab knows that it's like, because it's quite different because I'm a fairly new PI. So my postdocs are almost like near peers rather than my undergrads, for example. So, but there needs to be, so in my lab, there's like a culture of you need to work hard and you need to show up on time. And then if there's a problem, and that's back to the delegation thing, you need to create a environment or find a mentor that you're comfortable with. In case you mess up, then you need to be comfortable telling them that you messed up. And as a mentor, if you're an early career or if you're a postdoc and your grad student messes up, then you need to realize that you were once a postdoc or a grad student who used to make mistakes. So I think just having respect between all lab members and trying to understand that it's like any other relationship, right? You just need to have open communication, clear expectations, and everybody has different needs and ways of working. So I'll let Mike jump in.
Again, agree with everything you said. The only thing that I would add to that is that also remember that, those expectations are very likely to change with time. So I'm just thinking of a scenario where you have a brand new PhD student. The expectations and discussions that you have at the start with a first year PhD student, those expectations change, and they absolutely should change over the 3-4 years of their PhD. It's only 3 or 4 years here. I guess it's a bit longer in the States. So you do need to revisit those expectations, because that dynamic between the mentor and mentee will absolutely change. And as I say, it should change over that time. There's definitely more responsibility on the mentor at the start of that relationship, but definitely the mentee, as they progress through their PhD, definitely would start stepping up more. And again, that's all part of their development and handing more and more responsibility to them. So as I say, it's a very dynamic relationship, I think, in that case. I think setting out those boundaries earlier on is a great idea. Certainly with tutees, I tend to use what is called an early meeting expectation questionnaire. So it's good to give that to the tutees before your first meeting. And it's on a sliding scale between kind of 100% down to the tutor, 100% down to the tutee, and then there's lots of questions, and they're supposed to say whose responsibility it is. They can stick it in the middle of the two, say it's 50-50. And then it's always interesting to then sit and have that conversation with them and say, so why do you think that it's the responsibility of the tutor to arrange all the meetings, say, or to set the goals? And then you can kind of have a conversation around each of those points. And I think it kind of helps clarify where both parties are coming from, and it helps them find a kind of a middle ground, I guess. So it's very similar to what you were saying. It's just a slightly more, I wouldn't say formalized, because it's not really formal, but it just helps make sure all the bases are covered, because it's kind of there in black and white. But yeah, I
Sure,
think
Neil, I think you're muted.
Sorry, we have a question from George. Do you have a template of that meeting expectation questionnaire? That's question.
Yeah, I mean, I can send that. It's very much for personal tutors here at, it's designed for personal tutors, but I'm sure people could modify it for new students, PhD students, possibly even modify it for postdocs that are joining the team.
Yeah, my thought there is that it seems quite similar to the individual development plans, that I think there's a template at the NIH and different labs use it, but it's really valuable for sort of establishing, here are the different aspects of the work environment, how much you might be expected to contribute to research aspects and meeting aspects. And yeah, the more of that like any trainee could really look to, I think really helps provide like a foundation for grounding.
Yeah, and formalization, I mean, at least having some sort of template to talk off is actually really good for either mentors or mentee who are more quiet. So I mean, if you have more of a reserved personality, I feel like academia is kind of geared towards extroverts, but in general, if you have a list of things to touch upon, then even if it's an awkward conversation or like two people who are relatively quiet, you can set out your talking points. So I think having like some sort of list at the start of, and like benchmarks just to see like what is the plan. And even if you have your weekly meetings, during your weekly meetings, have an expectation of what your weekly meetings should be about. So like, for example, if you expect that like somebody comes in and like in my lab, like people can Slack me if they're stuck, or like Slack their supervisors. And that's different to some other labs where the PIs are far busier and don't want people to continuously slack them about things breaking. So I think just knowing and putting that out there of like, in a weekly meeting, I expect you to have this done. And I think like setting the expectation is on the PI, on the scale of the tutee, but also giving room to the mentee to say like what is achievable. Sometimes I feel like PIs don't realize how long it takes to do things. And it's nice to sometimes just be like, this is not achievable, but here's what I can do in a week, or this week there's like XYZ things that are also happening in the department. So so having that kind of and allowing that kind of communication is key. So
Yes, I totally agree. Like having realistic deadline and realistic clear expectation, as Mike mentioned, is very important. And having clear goals beforehand is very helpful for someone to grow in their career. And that way, even if the goals are clear and already set, then it becomes easier for their mentors also to help them to achieve their goals.
I mean, there's the obvious things that, you know, both the mentor and the mentee really have to commit to the process. It's, you know, you can't have one person being kind of passive in this. It's definitely both people need to be active in the kind of partnership. But setting goals is absolutely critical. Just building the trust. Again, that's a two-way street. That's not just the mentee needing to build trust, it's the mentor needing to build trust as well. And just I guess it's just establishing that communication and those lines of communication, making sure that they're always open, and people are free to kind of have their own opinions and everything gets discussed openly. And that can only really happen in an environment of trust. So, you know, it comes back to that, I guess.
Yeah,
But,
so I would say one of the things that I assume would be a question if somebody was asking questions like, how do you deal with difficult situations with your mentor, for example, or tricky things such as authorship on papers, for example, or in a lab when you're doing a project. This is me just preempting questions, but in general, for example, if you start out like helping on a project in a lab and then you feel like, oh, I've done a significant amount of work. Firstly, you need to, as I mentioned earlier, like, and as Dr. Bull mentioned as well, generate a environment when somebody can actually speak up and say like, okay, this is what I did, and would it be possible to be a co-author on this, for example, or like, okay, you were a co-author but you kind of didn't do any work. So, and on the flip side of, so having that conversation about authorship, I think even at the start of a project is pretty important. So for example, you need to be first author, especially as like grad students and postdocs on papers. So you want to make sure that authorship is at least known to all parties involved at the start of a project, and what the criteria is for, say, authorship on a paper. So that is one of the like tricky conversations that usually come up. But again, that's something that like, if you get that sorted out at the start and not just start a project. And so like when I always start off a project being like, these people are involved, people, I mean, it's not like that's set in stone, but these are the expectations of, and this is the order. And then based on if somebody else is contributing substantially, then sure. But that is one of the things where people get very hesitant to ask or get into weird territory, but
Even
it's okay to have
conflicts.
frank discussions are always necessary. So if you just put out the facts that this is what I've done, does this merit authorship, or things like that, that's fine.
Thank you, Anahita, for sharing these PI perspectives about how to handle these difficult situations.
Yeah, I think
You wanna ask?
following up. Following up on that, I had a previous supervisor who I actually quite liked the way he dealt with things like this when it came to authorships. He would literally sit there with the final draft before it was submitted, have all of the figures just printed out, and then people would say what they'd contributed to for the final figures that were kind of in the paper. Now, that's not necessarily foolproof because, of course, you could do a lot of work that ends up in failed experiments that don't ever make it into the paper. But I did feel that that was kind of a good way to kind of have everybody that's involved see exactly what everybody's contribution is, because sometimes it's not, it doesn't necessarily come across in lab meetings and things, especially when you've got several collaborators as well. It's sometimes quite difficult for people to see the big picture unless you kind of just lay it out on a table and go through it that way.
I would encourage audience to please feel free to unmute yourself to ask questions, because this is an interactive session and we want your contribution more, because this is for you, designed for you, basically.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Baul and Dr. Mehta, for your wonderful insight on today's work-life balance and the mentor-mentee thing. So I have a question. Like, sometime you helped your colleague in learning the techniques. Like in the first attempt, okay, you helped them and you got your contribution as a second or third author. But what about the subsequent publications?
So
I
this is
think,
again some,
oh,
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
carry
Naveen.
on. No, after you.
I think this is pretty lab specific, and it is dependent on, so I would say if this was a case in my lab, if you helped with a project, a specific technique, obviously, if you helped enough to like be integral to the project, you can be on like the first publication coming out of it. But just because you taught somebody one technique doesn't mean you can be on every paper after that. But that's, again, that's my view of authorship. Different labs have different views on authorships, but before you start off a new project, it's good to clarify, like, if you're not going to be on that project, then make sure you have like a fixed amount of like involvement in it. But don't waste your time knowing that you're not going to be on the project. At some point, you do need to like prioritize your work over work that you're not in. But I don't think, if it's like me telling somebody I taught you how to code, but now every paper you write with code, I'm on it. That doesn't work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it
why just
cannot
my
work
question.
like royalty.
Yeah.
It cannot be like you wrote a book and you will keep getting royalty throughout.
Yeah, that was my thought. It is not a situation with me. It is just come into my mind thought to ask for my future and ever like during this academia journey.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
if you were to design or produce say a particular vector that somebody was to use, and then you left the lab, but then they carried on using that vector for subsequent studies that, you know, carried on way after you'd left. I mean, I think then maybe you'd have an argument that you
Yes,
should
yeah.
still be included as an author, even though you haven't really done anything specific apart from supply that reagent. I mean, I don't know. Some people would say yes, some people would say no to that. Even in that scenario, some people would say, well, that's still not enough to claim authorship. But you know, I think every lab is different. I tend to work on being inclusive as opposed to exclusive. I tend to think if anybody has kind of contributed, even if it's people in the lab that have contributed during lab meetings and offered really quite insightful kind of views that have led to breakthroughs, I would still see that as a really significant contribution to the study, and then they may get included as an author on that paper. So I think
Yeah.
as Anahita said, it's very lab specific.
Right.
I
Yeah.
agree with Pankaj. Sometimes, like in some labs, this is the trend. Like if somebody did some part of the project, did some experiments, generated data, but that person left, and then somebody took over that project, and that person becomes just ghost author, like he's nowhere or she's nowhere, and then they come to know, oh, this publication came out, and they are nowhere. So that's unfortunate reality sometimes. So that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. Thank you for your thought on this wonderful like things. Like few months ago, actually, I was in the situation, just jumping to that work-life balance. I was struggling with find balance between my work and my personal life because my family just arrived a few months ago here in US. So that time I was okay, like how should I manage everything? Because I wanted to focus on my research work as I do always, and I won't able to do that. I don't know why, because of the family they came. See, it took me 2 months to, maintain a good balance between both. But after today's session and after your suggestions and clear view about the work-life balance and other mental things, now I know what I was doing that time. Something was right, something was wrong. So what I have to work on now.
Thank you,
And
Pankaj, for asking
thank you
questions.
so
And we
much. Yeah,
have 2 more minutes left in
yeah.
case we would
Thank you
like
so
to
much.
give opportunity to other people as well, in case somebody wants to unmute yourself or ask question. The speakers today.
I can ask.
Mhm. Go
I'm
ahead,
also a
please.
young PI. I just started last semester. I was with Bob Fusina at University of South Florida. So like Dr. Mehta mentioned, you should be an extrovert person in academia to be successful so that you can
Oh,
do
I did say
networking.
that. I said that academia is biased towards that, but it's not
Okay.
essential.
Yeah, okay. Fine. Okay. So my question is, sometime when you interact with people, especially senior people, you always encountered that awkward silence. So can you provide some conversation starters? Okay, these are the some of the things which you can have a conversation starter, and then things can keep rolling.
Yeah, so I feel like this is more of like mentorship can come from anywhere, right? So as like young PIs, you're in this weird situation that now you don't have a boss, but you also kind of have just randomly now become your own boss. So I would say it's easier for me to talk to people one-on-one and just know that everybody gets nervous, at least talking about, but ideally since grad school I was always told to, like, at a conference, for example, if there's a senior person who you really want to get feedback from, even as a young PI, you can email them beforehand, and then you kind of know what your questions are. If you're talking about like just bumping into them, I would, and if you don't feel confident about talking to things, like sometimes I just like, it's like you just have to make yourself do it. And almost like an alter ego, of you want to do this. And you don't need to make small talk. You can just say, like, hi, I am XYZ. I work on this. I was wondering if you had input on like a specific question, or what are your thoughts on something. If you're talking about like how to chat up with a person at a happy hour, then that is a very personality driven thing. But in general, most PIs, at least in the auditory field, are pretty nice. And if you just email them way in advance and set up a meeting, like, people have met with me even as a grad student, and people I've never like known. So you just need to make sure you get like a fixed amount of time and write to them, and then if you have just like a coffee, and then you can talk about your research. Nothing will come out of it maybe, but at least they know your face. So
I mean, I would also say that an ideal opportunity to meet with sort of senior PIs and senior postdocs that you're sort of keen to kind of interact with are definitely the poster sessions at ARO. You know, if you go to the midwinter meeting, that's an ideal time to get round and speak to people. I mean, it's an icebreaker in itself, standing in front of a poster. So always sort of tend to have a look to see where people from their lab are showing posters, and no doubt they will turn up at some point to support their student or postdoc, and that's an ideal time to sort of get chatting to them. But I absolutely agree with what you said, though. We're very fortunate to work in a particular area of science where all of the senior people, I don't think I've yet come across a single one and found them to be grumpy. Everybody is keen to kind of chat, yeah, so we are very lucky in that regard.
We have one question in the chat from Shakila. So in order to approach PIs, there are several ways. One is if you're going to ARO, as I mentioned, email people beforehand just to say like, hey, this is, and like attach your CV if you want, and this is what I'm working on. Would you have time, like half an hour or so, to just chat about potential opportunities? If you have a postdoc in your lab, always reach out to them so that they can introduce you to people they know. So they might introduce them to the postdocs or the PIs you want to work with. Networking just one level up is easier. So for example, if you want to interact with grad students, so find a senior grad student, go to their poster, ask if they can like maybe introduce you at a happy hour or some event to their supervisor. So I would say if you don't have any networks, then it's okay to email people. Just make sure you email them well before the conference, because people schedules get very full, especially senior PIs. So, and in terms of approaching PIs, have a plan of like, this is my background, this is what I'm interested in. It helps if, for example, if you're an international student, then like, how have you thought of through funding? And don't take it personally if they say like, I don't have space in the lab, because it's not on you, it's just they don't have funding, or it's not a good fit. But yeah, you should try and approach it through networks in their lab or just email them. I don't know, Mike, if...
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I think that sounds exactly what I would kind of expect, you know, to receive an email to say, if you've got 10 minutes, it'd be great to catch up, you know, at ARO or wherever, or even these days, obviously with Teams and Zoom, you can kind of, you know, it spans the globe. You don't have to kind of wait until you're in Orlando to meet with people.
Yeah, and this goes off even outside of a conference. For example, if you can go to it's your mentor's job to connect you to like your next stage of your career. So if you're an undergrad and looking for PhDs, you need to tell your mentor like, hey, I'm interested in these labs. So like my postbacks, they make a Excel sheet, and then we're like, okay, this is what you require for this lab. This lab is like, I don't know them, but I know this person. So I can send an email and being like, hey, I just want to connect you with this person. And you can have a Zoom meeting. There are lots of different things you can do. So it is part of the mentor-mentee like agreement that they help you navigate your career. So don't be afraid to ask them to like help you navigate this.
Since it's already 6 minutes past schedule time, we would like to take probably one more question if somebody is interested, and then we can conclude the session. Mike, you wanted to add something?
No,
Okay.
all good, thanks.
I don't have a question, but I really would like to thank Dr. Mehta, Dr. Ball, and Dr. Singh, everybody for this very nice meet. I missed the first few minutes, but I think I can listen online later also. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madhuri, for joining us today. All right, if we don't have any question, then we can conclude the session here. And I would like to thank again both of our speakers, Dr. Mehta and Dr. Bowell. Thank you so much for sharing your wonderful insights and experiences about today's topic. And I'm sure attendees got definitely some novel insights about how to maintain good work-life balance. Sorry, and having an effective communication with their mentor to become successful in their career. So thank you so much. And I would like to remind again, as George shared here, we have another session navigating the grant landscape at 3:45 p.m. Please don't forget to register yourself and attend the session. Thank you so much and have a nice day.
Thank you.